Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Polo, and this is the video that you are supposed to watch in place of class time for Wednesday, October 8th. So a reminder that I am traveling with other students, and so we are not having class on this date. You are supposed to watch this video in place of class time. On our agenda, I have one quick housekeeping item, which is to remind you that on the course schedule, there is a link to a survey on October 15th for gathering data from you, if you would like, to help me form the groups for project number 3. That survey is optional. If you decide to fill it out, I'm not guaranteeing that I'm able to honor folks's, preferences and schedules and such, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to provide that feedback. Now, on the rest of our agenda, I'm going to talk briefly about how to access your feedback on Project 1 once it's available. We're just going to touch a little bit on today's code-dependent readings. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a lecture regarding rhetoric in project number 2. If we had had class time together today, we would have also had a discussion of this. And then the last thing that I'm going to do today is just go over briefly the instructions for our upcoming peer review of project 2. So project number 1, you guys turned this in a couple of weeks ago, and we are getting to the point where I'm going to be returning that feedback to you. And once I do, I want to explain how you're going to access that. So the way that you're going to get your feedback when it's available is you're going to get an email to your Kadi email account, like you usually do whenever there's a graded work of some kind. And it'll say Sarah Polo has given feedback, something, something, something to that effect. So what you'll want to do at that point is sign into e-learning, go into our FWS 101 course, and there go to either the gradebook or the assignment section, and that's where you'll find the information that you need. So you'll have to look for where it has Project 1, the summary and analysis paper, and probably click to open that. Once you are in that assignment or that gradebook entry, you're going to see a grade. That grade is probably going to be in the form of a percentage and a letter grade. But you do not want to stop there because there are going to be 2 file attachments in addition. Those 2 file attachments will be kind of below your grade, and they will both be Word documents, Microsoft Word documents. They will have 2 slightly different file names. One project will say your last name, project 1, and Polo comments. The file name of the second one will say last name, project 1, Polo summary. Okay. Both of these documents are extremely important. You're going to need to open both of those on a computer that has Microsoft Word installed so that you can access that feedback. If you do not have Microsoft Word on your personal computer, that's absolutely fine, but it means you need to take the extra step of going to a Kadi computer so that you can open and save that feedback. So when you open the file that ends with Polo comments, you're going to see your Word document project that you submitted, but on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see a whole bunch of little speech bubbles. And when you click each of those, you'll see the comments that I have left on your work. When you open the file that says Project 1 Polo Summary, what you're going to see is a Word document with a bunch of instructions. And the instructions will have something to this effect where it tells you what to do with this feedback, and it tells you that below are the assignment criteria. And for many of those criteria, I will use bolded text to indicate the areas of particular strength in your project, meaning the things that you did most effectively. Using underlined text, I will indicate the areas in your project that are in the need of most improvement going forward. Okay, so you're looking for bolded text in that assignment criteria, and you're looking for underlined text in that assignment criteria. So just to show you another quick screenshot, this is just a portion, a small piece of the overarching project 1 assignment criteria. And this is from the section regarding part one, which was your summary. And let's say that this was your feedback and you had gotten this, and the section of this criteria that said the writer's purpose for addressing the issue was bolded. That would mean, according to this list, that bolded text was something that you did particularly well. But let's say you're reading this feedback and you have some text underlined in here, such as like the text intended audience is underlined. That means that was an area for you in that project summary where you could have done a better job of identifying that audience. Maybe you didn't make it clear, maybe you didn't use those exact words. So that would be an example of the type of feedback you might have received. So I do that for most of the assignment criteria, but I don't do that for all of the assignment criteria. My goal with my feedback is to help you see areas to improve in the future and what to prioritize going forward. So what should I do with my feedback? Well, first, make sure that you fully read your feedback all the way through. If you have questions, so something in your feedback doesn't make sense to you, you're not understanding, you absolutely need to ask. However, our syllabus has a very specific policy for asking questions. So it says that you need to wait at least 24 hours from when I post your feedback on a major project before you send me any emails asking to me or asking, for specific responses. Okay. So do not send me any emails until it has been at least 24 hours. If you are just immediately seeing your grade and then immediately emailing me, then you have not taken the time to read the feedback that I have spent a long time crafting for you, and you're not going to be informed enough to have a meeting with me yet. Okay. So wait 24 hours. After that time has elapsed, if you still don't understand your feedback or still have questions, you may absolutely email me to set up a time to meet. If you prefer, you can use the scheduling tool that I use to set up a meeting with me that way. Okay. Now, you all have access to a revision option this semester that is described in detail in our class syllabus. So if that's something you'd like to pursue, you are welcome to do so. Regardless of whether or not you revise, everybody needs to think about how they are going to incorporate this feedback into their upcoming projects. There are going to be some projects where the application is like really obvious. For example, say that you struggled with the thesis in project one. Well, we have a thesis in project two. So that would be something to be thinking about how you're going to show improvement with that. There might be other things with this particular project one where those skills don't show up again until one of our upcoming projects. But the goal here is growth. Every once in a while, I have a student that thinks that they don't need this class, or, that they shouldn't have to take a required writing class. But the truth of the matter is that all of us, every single one of us, myself included, always have things that we can improve in with regard to writing and rhetoric. This is an ongoing, lifelong pursuit of effective communication and analysis. So you are going to have things that you can improve in, and you need to have a good attitude about improving in those things. So that's my little tangent about that. Thanks for listening. Now for today, moving on, you read chapter number 5 of Codependent, and I'm happy to announce that this means you have made it to the halfway point of this book. So exciting stuff. We've now made it through chapter number 5. And in your response rating for today, there were 2 specific questions that you responded to. And I very much look forward to seeing your responses on those. As you know, this chapter's title, Your Freedom, really captures what Mergia thinks is at stake here. This is a really big, really important issue about how we are defining and thinking about criminality and how we're thinking about justice And these are really big questions. And that's why some of the things I asked you about were your thoughts on these issues. There are not clear right or wrong answers, but I look forward to seeing how you are deepening your thinking about these issues. What we're going to do next is a little bit of a mini lecture. Let's start out with quickly recapping. In this class, we have learned that a text is anything that communicates meaning to an audience. We've learned that writing is the production of text. So that means that even when we're making a very multimodal text or a very auditory mode-based text like a podcast, that's still considered writing. We've also learned that annotating is about engaging or interacting with text in order to increase our understanding of them. Now, we have also learned a lot about rhetoric, but because it's been a while since we had lectures about rhetoric, I want to remind you that Let's Get Writing defined rhetoric for us as the art or method of communicating effectively to an audience, usually with the intention to persuade. And another way that I phrased this for you previously is that this is tools that we use to make our communication effective. Now, whenever you are doing a rhetorical analysis, it means that you're analyzing how effectively a writer or speaker communicates their message to their audience. We have already learned about these rhetorical appeals or strategies. So if you need a refresher about what ethos, logos, and pathos are, as well as kairos, please go back to Unit 1, where we had readings about these specific things. Up on the screen now, what you're seeing are those 5 elements of a text rhetorical situation. This triangle was one way to think about the parts of the situation of a text, the communicator, the audience, and the message. And then these 5 that come from Let's Get Writing are just another way to break this down and think deeply about what a text is doing. So the reason that I'm recapping this for you is because you are now very much the communicator of your project too. And you have to think about how you are going to use these rhetorical appeals in your podcast episode. Not just that, but in the reflection for Project 2, you have to actually write about in detail with examples how you made use of these. AI is not going to be able to write this for you because this is a metacognitive explanation of the choices that you made in your episode in order to make it effective. So let me break down this situation just a little bit using some of those terms about the rhetorical situation. So the communicator or writer of the podcast episode is you, absolutely. The issue that you are addressing is your argument, your thesis. So this is about which dimension of personal and social responsibility is important and why. Remember, that's going to be your I believe thesis. Regarding purpose, your goal is to persuade your listeners that this thesis is correct, and possibly with the intention of shaping their attitudes and behaviors going forward. That was something I posited to you at the beginning of this unit, that like maybe that's kind of also a goal here. The form that this text is taking is a podcast episode, yes. It's one that fits what we've learned about monologue or performance presentation episodes. It uses the structure of a This I Believe story or essay. And remember also, form here, that this is a specific episode that you're supposed to envision is part of the larger FWS, the podcast, right? So a specific episode in the current season. The final piece of your text rhetorical situation is the audience. So your audience, the assignment sheet tells us, is supposed to be the general public, people who listen to podcasts. But this is important because the choices you make in your episode need to reflect that you are thinking critically about how to make your text appealing to as wide a group of folks as possible. Remember that the people who listen to your episode may be very unfamiliar with Cotty College. They've probably never heard of First Year Writing Seminar. They probably have never heard someone list out like dimensions of personal and social responsibility. And that's why it is all the more important, y'all, that you fully explain that context for your listeners somewhere in the beginning of your episode. So if you have not incorporated those yet into your script, go back and do that. Okay, go back and see, where do I need to explain what COTI is? Where do I need to explain what this class is? Where do I need to explain exactly what this document that we're using that has dimensions and character traits is? Give your listeners that context. This is about showing that you can adapt to your wide audience. Now, you will need to not just appeal to the audience, but do so using all three of those rhetorical appeals and kairos. So ethos, logos, pathos, kairos. And be able to say how you used those. So that's the metacognitive thinking about thinking experience of your reflection. Now, in today's response writing, I asked you questions about your progress. So I asked you which dimension you're using. I asked you about what experiences from your life you're telling. And I asked you to brainstorm how you're using ethos, logos, pathos, and kairos. And it is very important that in your reflection, when you answer those questions about this, that you are being super specific. So you do not want your answers to the reflection questions about this to be generic. You do not want them to be something that could be like stuck onto somebody else's reflection and make sense there. You need to make them so specific that it only applies to your project. So if I go to read your finished reflection and all I see is you making general statements like, I used ethos because I made myself seem trustworthy. How? If you don't answer those things specifically, I can't give you credit for those portions of the assignment. So if we had had class today, I would have had you do some group work where you each compiled your thoughts about how to use those rhetorical appeals. Since we're not having class, I am going to give you some ideas. And up on the screen are just some like general reminders about what each of these things are. So you're welcome to pause the video. You can also access these slides within the schedule for today. So a reminder of what ethos is on the left side, and then on the right side, what are some things that you could do? And it's impossible for me to make these specific in my slides because I don't know what you're doing in your episode. But here are some things for you to consider and then adopt and make specific to your work. What about logos? So on the left-hand side of the screen is a reminder of what logos is and how this might show up in your episode. And again, be specific. You can pause if you like. What about pathos? A reminder on the left of what pathos is and how you might be making use of that. At the bottom of the screen here, I've said also consider not just what the audience is supposed to feel, but what does it sound to your listeners like you, the speaker, are feeling? And how are they supposed to react to that? So how are you making use of emotion through things like your tone, your word choice, your speaking rate? If you slow down your words, how does that impact the way pathos is feeling for your audience? Just an example. What about kairos? A reminder of what kairos can be and how you might think about it within your podcast. All right, and you're welcome to pause or come revisit these in the slides. All right, the final thing I'm going to do today is talk about Project 2's peer review. So my goal in going through each of those rhetorical appeals was to remind you what these are, but also to help you with your reflection. So I hope that you are taking the time to draft out your reflection carefully. This is one of the #1 things that I see students struggle with in this project is they might have made a really good episode, but if they don't talk about, in the reflection, why these were effective choices and give me lots of details, I'm not going to get it. Okay. I'm the audience for your reflection. I need you to show me and tell me why your episode is so great and be sure to use this language of rhetoric. Okay. So I want to remind you that we have peer review of Project 2's transcript coming up and peer review of the reflection coming up. So up on the screen are some reminders about the difference between global and local issues. Now, you all were in a position where you didn't have peer review of the first assignment, Project 1, but you are going to have it of Project 2. So remember that global issues are the types of things that we are peer reviewing for. What we're not doing is editing. So we're not making changes to the students' grammar, their punctuation, any of that stuff. We're only pointing those things out if there's a recurring pattern throughout. So make sure that when you do peer review next week, you're paying attention to that. So I'm going to grab the schedule here. Oh, actually, first, I want to remind you that we have these qualities of effective feedback. These are the things I talked about before we were going to do Project 1's peer review. So you can't really answer that highlighted question, but you can think about now, how am I going to make sure I do these things in Project 2? How am I going to make sure that I point out strengths as well as weaknesses in the drafts that I see? Can I make sure that I'm writing my feedback about the transcript and the reflection, not about the person who wrote them, making sure to phrase my feedback constructively? Okay. All right, so now I'm going to grab the schedule. So when you are looking at the schedule, a reminder that we do not have class on October 10th. That's mid-semester break. Peer review takes place next week on the 13th and the 15th. So you'll bring 2 printed out copies of your transcript on the 13th and 2 printed out copies of your reflection on the 15th. If you don't bring those materials, I cannot give you credit for having them. You must be present to get those points as well. So as we get to each day, be sure to open up the peer review instructions and read those before you come to class. If you don't do that, you're going to be very confused. So read the peer review instructions before you come to class each day. All right, y'all. That's all for now. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you are welcome to send me an email. Keep in mind that I'm traveling, so my access to email may be somewhat limited. However, I will respond as soon as I am able to do so. Thank you all very much.